Hi, this is Audrey Blair, and you're listening to the Change is Hard podcast, episode 11. Hi, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. I am excited for today's episode because I don't brag on my clients enough, and I do feel very fortunate to do what I do. This is an interview that I did with a client in 2023, and we were catching up, talking about some of the things that helped him through coaching. But recently, I received a text from him, and this is what it said. Over 2 years ago, we sat down and did a guided meditation. The vision of a tiger pacing in a cage represented Dom, who was trapped inside of himself. From there, I have spoken at conferences, started a blog, and in the next week or so, will officially be a published author. I wanted to share this news with you and not have you find out via LinkedIn. I honestly could not have done any of this without your coaching. It is honestly hard to believe that Dom has emerged and is confident about putting himself out there. Thank you so much for believing in me when I struggle to. And it's just so refreshing and so amazing to get updates from clients and see how they continue to build on the momentum of the work that we do together. Enjoy this interview. It's about some of the things that we did when we were working together. And if you're feeling stuck, I think there's some nuggets in the story that you can relate to. It does get a little nerdy at times, but that's okay. Hang in there. There are some gems throughout, and I hope that you enjoy. Well, hello, Dominick.
Hey, Audrey, how are you?
I'm good. I am so happy to see you. It's been a while since I've seen you, so I'm glad that we have an opportunity to catch up during this time.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Feels like it's been way too long. My gosh. But you know what's really great? Since the last time we talked, so much has happened, right? So it's really exciting to just share some new developments here that have happened very recently.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, let's jump right in. I mean, I think one of the things, probably it's been about 2 years ago now. Gosh, is that right? 2 years that you got married?
Oh my gosh, no, actually, we're working on year four
Year
almost here.
four.
Yeah,
Oh
we're
my
we're
gosh.
approaching year four. Time flies, doesn't
Oops.
it?
It does fly. And during that time, I just remember during that particular time, you had all the things going on. You were getting married, you were moving houses, you were moving states, you were changing jobs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that all happened. Actually, I think we met just in the middle of that chaos. I think I had just started, and that's when you and I met. And I think at that point, we finally had a house under contract, luckily. But the whole process of taking on a new job, buying a house, and getting married all within 6 months, that was a very exciting summer for sure.
Yeah, exciting. And I don't know how you kept your head on. I mean, all of those things aren't all of those things in like the top 10 stressful things for people to be going through and all require a significant amount of change. Because it wasn't even that you bought a house, you actually also moved states, right? You moved from where to where?
Yeah, so I was living in central Pennsylvania, moved to North Jersey. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely a lot of stress. I think somebody actually said to me, well, why don't you just build a house and have a kid and you could just get it all done in the first year of marriage, right? Yeah, I mean, a lot of it took place all at the exact same time. And obviously it was difficult, right? There was a lot of challenges there. But I think for me, one of the things that was really helpful through the whole process. All these things were exciting changes. A new career, new job, moving, getting married. It's kind of a unique situation for us. But my wife and I, we lived in completely separate states. These days, it's common that everyone moves in together and they live together a little bit before they get married. I mean, we lived together for all 1 month before we got married. So for the first time, we were in the same town. We had dinner together on the weeknights. It was crazy how much of a difference it was. But that kind of helped build that excitement and kind of help drive things forward, if you will, made it a little easier.
Good. In your case, it made it easier. Some people, they're like, wait, I get to see you every day. Is this a good thing? Or so, yeah, that's great. It all worked out.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because 6 months after we get married, everything shut down. We had to learn the rules to work together. at the same time. So she's a professional musician, so she's playing flute all day. But we definitely found our way, and I think what it was for us too was really being able to communicate and have those conversations and be able to say, okay, here's what I need to do, set the expectations, and we just kind of work together through those things. And I mean, was it easy? No. I mean, it is really funny though that my wife could recite my training curriculum as I was going through. Like she,
That's hilarious.
but that kind of adjustment was really interesting for us.
And now you're able to focus on continuing to build your home life, but also extend through your career to go, okay, now here's my path and what I'm doing going forward. So you've been able to lay all that foundations. And that's when we started working together, actually, is when
Mm-hmm.
you can tell me in your own words, but what I heard was, listen, I'm not sure what I want to be doing right now. Something feels a little bit off. You weren't necessarily looking to at that moment change or switch jobs or anything like that. You just felt a little bit stuck. Is that right?
Yeah, and stuck is a great way to say that because well, I hadn't arrived at that moment yet mentally, but when we first sat down, I think I was starting to recognize that where I was at, I was going to need to make a change, right? So I liked what I was doing, but it just felt like I was struggling to be heard. I was struggling to grow, and it was just about time for that transition. So
Yeah.
and like I said, wasn't necessarily looking, but took a chance, right? Start to reassess what did I want to do, where I wanted to be, and put myself on a track with your help to head in that direction because I just felt like for a while I was just treading water and just not getting anywhere. And that's extremely frustrating.
Yeah. It was kind of a classic case of no bad reviews. Everything was positive. Keep doing what you're doing. We value what you're doing, but nothing beyond that, even with some of the things you proposed, wasn't getting picked up. There wasn't a path or a promotion or all of those things, just kind of this sitting where you were. And there was so much more that you could provide and so much more value that frankly you could have leveraged that wasn't being leveraged. And so in that case, if you then figured out another place for you that was going to be able to leverage a lot more of what you could provide.
And that's what was so different. You actually hit it right there. You said, where felt like ideas I had weren't getting picked up. Absolutely. That was a really frustrating point for me. So, I don't know if you talked about some of your other episodes yet or not, but John Maxwell value exercise and creativity and innovation is one of mine. And that was probably where I felt the most stuck, right? I wanted to be able to create new ideas, innovate, do things better. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that muscle wasn't getting flexed at that point. And moving into my new role, it was kind of interesting because I joined and my director says to me, he says, so we don't have a Power BI practice here. Go build one. Good luck. And it was all from scratch, right? So you're building brand new artifacts and stuff like that. And then getting to flex that creativity muscle
Mm-hmm.
really was like a shot in the arm for me, right? It was really being able to start to I felt well actually one, I felt like my old self a little bit more, right? I wasn't stale, I wasn't stagnant. Like I was actually doing something. I felt like I was driving towards a purpose, and even to this day, it's now refinement, growing, continuing to grow the practice, and as a result, what's been neat is not only have I been exercising that skill set, other skills, other values that I could bring start to come out of the woodwork, and they're starting to be put on display each and every day when I come to work.
And that is fantastic. And I love one, just we haven't talked in a little while. It's probably been about 6 months or so. And I love that you still have that same energy and same enthusiasm for when you first started. That's just so amazing. I love that. But if you don't mind, I would love to go back at the beginning because this was a little bit of we had to work through a couple things, even once you reach the point of, yeah, maybe I'm open to exploring other opportunities and finding a better match for me. And when we first started talking about it, there was a pattern that you had in the past of when you would switch jobs, a lot of times you would go backwards to go forward, or it would be something linear rather than how can I expand or grow or take the next one or two steps above where I am. And so talk a little bit about that mindset and then we can explore some of the work that we did in order to get you to where you are now.
Yeah, actually. So that pattern was definitely there. Very early in my career, I worked for a couple different places, right? And every time I left for a new position, it always was a lateral position, right? It was always something similar, sometimes a little bump in pay, but it was really, at the end of the day, it just felt pretty flat. So I eventually found my way to a position where I was able to grow and grew there, but then got to a point, continued to make lateral moves each step of the way. So, I always found that I could grow inside of an organization, but the moves were always challenging. And I think some of it, was I don't know if it was discouraging, but it was very frustrating because I applied for the jobs that were reaches, right? The ones that were the step up, but not getting bites, I'm not getting interest, people aren't calling me back, and it was very frustrating to some degree, right? And quite honestly, it drains you after a while, right? It becomes an extremely depressing. Maybe it's a little harsh word, but it is a little depressing sometimes when you keep trying and you just can't seem to break through.
Yeah, definitely depressing, a little discouraging when that's happening.
Mhm.
And then also it can feel a little defeating when you're like, gosh, I'm trying, what's missing? What am I not doing? What's going on here? And so one of the things I know that we talked about really was around the self-concept of helping you to see yourself in a different way and present yourself in a different way by leveraging all that you had to offer, because some of those lateral moves was like you were also having a hard time seeing yourself in that spot. So taking that leap and making the adjustments or the changes, whether it's in your resume or even from an interview perspective, how you presented yourself was something that needed to shift. And it started really with your mindset.
Totally. And that's what was kind of interesting when you start to look at things a little differently, right? And you look at the value of what you bring. That for me was probably the aha moment, right? Where everything kind of started to shift, because quite often I look at resume, or I would write a resume. And I remember you looked at my resume the first time, you're like, oh no, no, we can't do this.
Maybe I did. Maybe I did.
Oh, oh no, it was bad. It was bad. Let's be honest. The cards on the table, it was bad. But it was so much about what I did and not about the value I was bringing, or the results that I was driving. And what I thought was so interesting when it was all said and done, when I went through my interview process, there were some technical questions and things like that, but there was a lot more questions around the value, or the opportunities to answer the question to show the value that I bring, I should say. And that's where it landed me where I'm at, right? And just because I maybe didn't have some of the experiences requested or put into the job description, but I was able to show my value and how I could do that some other places. It made it a really easy transition, right? So by focusing on that value, suddenly things start to open up, right? It became easier to have the conversations, and not just with job interviews, but with other skills
Mhm.
as well, right? Other interactions I have.
Yes, I love that because we get so bogged down with those job descriptions that's written by, I don't know, half the time somebody who doesn't even do the job. But even if it is somebody who understands the role, they're writing for like this fantasy person. And so we're looking at it, and there's all these boxes that need to be checked. There's all these skills, there's all these years that they put in there. And it's kind of like, okay, here would be the dream person for this job. That very few people actually meet that criteria. And even if they did, they'd be in a job that's much higher up than what this job role was, right? let's
Absolutely,
let's
right?
be honest.
Oh
So
gosh.
yes, and that is one of the more discouraging aspects of it. So being able to read those through an objective, from an objective mind, and start questioning a lot of these things. One is, I know that was an exercise we did, but secondly, for you to go, maybe I don't have that box specifically checked, but here's what I know I can do. Here's what
Mhm.
I know I can bring. Here's how I know I can provide value overall to this organization, to this role, to this team. And that makes for a much more interesting conversation, a much more interesting interview when you're able to break the mold and break out of some of those, here are these certifications and boxes that I can check versus, hey, this is what I can do for you. And I'm also checking you out to see if you're a good fit for me as well.
Once I understood that, it all just became much easier, right? The nerves of the interview process
Hmm.
kind of just fade away, right? You hear the question, you take a breath, focus on what the values come, right? It's so much more at ease, or I
Yeah.
felt so much more at ease.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a significant jump, both in the role that you, from the role you were at to the role that you now have. It was a significant increase in jump in the pay and the structure and the bonus. All of those things came along with that by you shifting your mindset, how you saw yourself, your self concept, starting there first, so that you could provide that to
Mhm.
the person or the persons that were interviewing you. And a lot of times it's the opposite. People want others to see something in them that they don't see themselves.
Hmm.
But that work to shift that is so vitally important. I love that. It's and that was a lot of fun going through that process with you, because it wasn't all like rainbows and daisies and butterflies. There were
Hmm.
moments of like, oh my gosh, is this going to work? So there was a lot of coaching that happened in order to get to that space. But it was certainly fun, and
Yeah.
well deserved, honestly. So,
I do remember having the essentially the "what do you want to do when you grow up" conversation, right? It was,
hmm
seriously, right? There was a lot of soul searching because I was trying to figure out what do I want to do next. I didn't want to just make a random jump, right? I wanted to make a calculated jump. I wanted to know what direction I was heading, and it's paid off, right? Because I'm happy. I didn't just take the first job that was offered to me just to get out. I didn't just apply someplace. I didn't take a job because it paid well
hmm
and money will make me happy, right?
hmm
It doesn't make life worse sometimes, but you know what
sure.
I mean. But it definitely it allowed me to have that perspective to also I would say you say what's my value,
hmm
and will I be received that way, right? So as I went through the interview process, could people see my value? Could they recognize my value and what I was bringing? Because when people could recognize your value, then you don't run into the slumps and the feeling stagnant because nobody's listening or asking for you to kind of step in, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And even so, I mean, I know you've, how long has it been? A year and a half now since you've,
Yeah, it's about a year and a half.
yeah. After about 6 months or so, your team went through a change. There was a hole and there was an opportunity. And there was that moment where you said your director invited you to apply for that role, even though you hadn't even been there a year, which was one of the requirements for this role. What did that feel like?
Yeah, that was quite an experience, right? So, and in fairness, I did reach out first. I did say, "Hey, I'm interested," and the response was,
Mm-hmm.
"Yes, you should apply for this. Please do." It was humbling a little bit here. So it's really funny. I take this job and I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by some really, really smart people. So like you're like, oh my gosh, like and to be essentially invited to go through the process and not just through the first round of process, but all the way through the process, only being there for 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty exciting, no question about that.
Yeah, and you actually ended up being one of the two finalists, right?
Correct. I was one of the two finalists. What was neat was at the end of the interview process, we got through to the end, and unfortunately, spoiler alert, I didn't get the position. But what I thought was really great was at the end was I had a really great conversation with my director, and he said to me, he said, "Look, Dominic, you were in the running up to the very last minute. It was very difficult to make a decision, one way or another. But what I appreciated out of that conversation, right, was back to the value, right? Here's the value that you're bringing, right, at every step of the way. What I thought was unique about the situation was is that the person who did get the position wasn't an outside hire, was actually my peer up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought was really great out of the whole thing too was is that the conversation eventually steered toward, okay, you bring your value here. My manager, he brings his value here. And there's an opportunity for you both to complement each other through this process. And that was really exciting to me because it was an opportunity. Not only was, hey, look, you didn't necessarily get the position, right? But we see opportunity for you to step up in these spots, for to be a leader within the organization without maybe the title, right? But ways to be the team lead or step in to fill a void that needs to be filled, and work directly with my manager to build that out. So I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't disappointed that I didn't get the position. Of course, I was a little disappointed,
Sure.
but it was exciting to see the opportunity also too, right, out of the whole thing.
Yeah, of course, there's a little bit of disappointment because you get your heart in it, and that's great. And getting that feedback, very fantastic. But again, it shows to you understanding what you bring, that value, as you started very early to increase your influence there as well. And one of the things I know we talked about, even when you started the role, was focusing on
Mhm.
building relationships and not showing up every day like you had something to prove. And that was a big shift as well.
Yeah, that's always been a shift because I think we talked about the time that I was unemployed and I took a job. I joined late in the project, but there was this rumor that 10 people were going to get picked to go into the next project, and there were 70 of us in the pool, and I'm 3 months behind everyone else. So I just started running, right? And it proved and it worked out really well. But it was that concept of like, I've got something to prove that follows you, but instead turning the focus to, look, I made it here. If I'm working here, I know what I'm doing. I clearly understand my business and technology that I'm responsible for. So anything I can do to instead build relationships so I can make the connections to different parts of the business and stuff like that, that actually has proven to be a far better effect
Mm-hmm.
or far better method. Because not only am I working on building my piece, but because of the influence and the relationships with others, my area, my practice has just grown organically because somebody says, "Hey, I know this Power AI guy, and he can help us out with this." And he showed me something he could do here. Yeah, let's call Dominick. He can come in here and help out. So it's kind of amazing how quickly those relationships actually, without any intent to like
Mm-hmm.
gain anything from them, but just simply being honest and sincere and focusing on building that relationship ended up adding so much more over time.
You've done some big things in the last year and a half, right? Early on, a couple things. You started a blog, Data with Dom, which is pretty cool. You
Yeah.
got some followers there now. And the other thing is you applied and you were accepted to be a speaker at one of Microsoft's data conferences. Is that right? A couple of them.
Yeah, I actually, the people that you always look up to, and you're like, these people are really cool when it comes to data. I'm such a nerd saying this out loud, but it's okay. For those of us that are in the Power BI space, like guys in a cube, Chris Wagner, the Italians from SQL BI, there's all these people that are very well known in the Power BI community. You and I talked a little bit about this. I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to speak at these things, but I've always been so nervous to some degree. Like, is there going to be rejection? Are people going to like respond negatively or anything like that? And I said, no, I'm going to go for it. And I applied for the biggest event of the year for Power BI, the Global Power BI Summit, and got picked.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my gosh, I got to actually do this thing. So funny enough, actually, so I got picked to do one session last year, and I actually just came off doing
Nice.
2 sessions this year. So that was actually 2 weeks ago. And what's so funny is like all these nerves around putting yourself out there, around doing the blog and these speaking events. Like I was always worried, right? Like, are those internet trolls out there? Are they going to be like, well, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? Honestly, none of that's happened. And what I think is interesting is once again, it's not about even the topics I speak on, the articles I write. It's not necessarily about all the technical pieces. It's about the thought behind why do I do things and focusing on that. And I think one, that's what makes me an accessible speaker and blogger for many people to read. But two, you're not getting hung up on little technical details. It's more about what's the bigger problem we're trying to solve? What's the bigger solution at the end of the day we're trying to get to? And for me, that seems to be really the key. Changing that focus just made it so much easier to talk about.
Yeah, and to think that now you're one of those guys that somebody else is looking at and looking, gosh, how did he get here? And this is really amazing what he's sharing and showing. And now you are becoming one of them. And what's fantastic is they're just regular guys like you, but you put yourself out there, you showed up, and all of that stuff. It's just beautiful. Do it messy, do it nervous, and you would never do anything messy, by the way, but still, if if you needed to, if it were necessary,
Mhm.
but doing it scared and setting out. And I love just working with you in the time that we worked. I always appreciated just you putting in the work. The growth that you
Mhm.
had in the time that we worked together, for the 18 months that we were together. I just, it was phenomenal. You're kind of my poster
Mhm.
child of of starting at one place and just going through and changing that mindset. I'm so happy to do what I do. But so tell me what's been new with you. I mean, since we've talked, if anything,
Yeah.
how's it you continuing to grow your influence within the organization? So we talked a lot about influence with and without authority. We've talked and spent
Mhm.
some time on creating a greater presence. How's all that going for you?
Definitely, there's been some interesting developments over the last little bit of years, and I never really expected this. We had our first in-person kickoff. It is kind of funny. You don't realize sometimes your influence. But as you start to walk in to go grab a drink at the bar, and all of a sudden somebody comes up and he's like, "Oh, put that on my tab. You made me money this year. You helped me out," or "Hey, let's go talk strategy." Right? It was just so interesting to have these kinds of conversations. So many times in these conferences before, it was, you go and you hang out and you have fun, which is part of it, but it was never,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I ever had the strategic conversations at this level. Kind of back to the whole idea of being the leader without being the manager, right? Is that having that influence to work with different teams and to get them to start to understand and value what you bring every day, right? You're selling yourself to some degree and then taking that influence and actually turning it to the customer, influencing the customer. So here's what's really exciting, Audrey. I have to double check the exact numbers. But you remember how when we got started, I said, I'm not a salesperson at all.
Yes.
Not a salesperson. Um,
Uh-huh.
well, apparently when you bring value, you can sell.
Apparently.
So for me, this is really exciting. Like I'm about to cross the $1 million mark in signed revenue
Nice.
for my practice, which is like so exciting for something that didn't exist a year and a half ago, right? Right, like I said before, we don't have Power BI practice. Build it, go. Like to where we're at now, right? So that's been so exciting to hearing to be along, right? And learning that leadership is influence, and leadership doesn't have to be managing people. It's really about how leading different groups of people. It's sometimes quarterbacking a sales call. Sometimes it's leading a customer team and helping them understand the technology and make the right decisions to unlock their value. Sometimes it's just running a team meeting in the absence of your manager. There's all different kinds of things that happen, right? But probably for the first time, I'm seeing all these little spaces where I'm having the opportunity to drive that influence and lead those conversations.
Yes. Well, first of all, congratulations. That's amazing. Especially if you're making account reps money, they're going to be banging down your door. But for you to step in, and I know even early on, you were starting to have some of these sales calls. And at first, you were like, how do I get this off my plate? And I'm like, dude, go
Yeah.
do your thing. If you can't communicate what you do, no one else is going to be able to do it better than you.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to start there. But that is amazing.
It's really funny. I gotta tell you, you got shit right. So our mutual friend Tommy. So I've been working with one of his customers, and then we started talking about moving to the larger global organization. And we got on a call. We are getting ready to meet with this group. They're out of Europe. Tommy gets on the call and he says, "Here's how we're going to play this. Last time I queued up Dominic, and then Dominic just spoke with the customer for 45 minutes, and we closed the deal. Everyone else, shut your mouths. Just let Dominic do his thing." Talk about a level of trust and influence that an
Hmm.
account executive who has a whole sales team supporting him says, "Let Dominic run the show." That, whoa.
Yeah. That's influence. That's understanding what you bring.
Mhm.
That's not waiting for somebody to tell you what you bring. You're like, this is how I'm showing up. So you can put your trust in me
Mhm.
and I'm going to help you close these
Mhm.
deals. That is fantastic, Dominic. I love that. I love that. And even for people who feel like, well, I can't make a difference unless I'm at this level or this title, none of that matters when you are good at understanding what you bring and can drive that influence and your presence, how you show up, that experience with you. all of that, when you know what that is, people see that and then they're going to love it and they love it. I'm very, very proud.
Well, thank you.
And I do know Tommy, and that totally sounds like something he would do 100%.
But you know what? But exactly what you said there too is like not waiting, right? Taking advantage of the situation, developing the relationship. Not to sound old school, but it's like almost go through the Rolodex, right? I'll go through the org chart. Like here's people like, hey, here's a sales team from Philly. I'm from Philly. Let's go talk. Like cheesesteaks,
Mm-hmm.
hoagies, Phillies, Eagles,
Yes.
Sixers. Hey, Power BI. Wait, what's that? Oh, let me tell you, right? And you build it from there.
And that's the difference between being open and going into a situation open and with curiosity and hey, I don't have to have all the details to figure out how to make this work. I trust myself to go in and make this work. That's
Because
huge.
that was a problem for a while, right? Like mapping out the
Yes, it
conversation that
was.
you're going to have. Like, what's my question going to be? If I trusting yourself is probably the biggest piece there too. Is it was one of the things you helped me understand was how do I actually trust myself in these situations? Trust myself, the value, and letting the value speak for itself.
Yes, because you were the classic case of running through every version of the conversation. Like you had it
Mhm.
all scripted and mapped out. And we had to break that pattern in your brain freaking out. Like, I got to know what I'm saying going into this meeting.
Mhm.
And no, you don't.
And it's really funny because actually now too, it's like if you don't see my value, I move on, which I thought was an interesting thing. So I actually had somebody and they're like, "Oh, well, this is what you need to do for a service." I said, "No, that's not what the customer needs." And no, you got to do blah 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 blah. And they said to me, "They said, well, a partner will do this." So I said, "Fine, send us a partner." I'm not afraid now to say if you don't see my value, that's fine. I've got a whole other group of people here that I'm making money with. I don't need to fight for $15,000 SOW when I'm signing 100, 200, $300,000 SOWs every year.
That is so powerful. That understanding those boundaries and being able to say no and not even worry about it.
Yeah, I used to think that it was because they didn't like me, right? Or that I would have to fight to make sure that they would, But like now, it's like that's okay because I'm just going to keep building this over here and here, and eventually, you're going to have to sell my services the way they're designed. Eventually, right?
Yep.
If I'm making enough money, I'm going to be at CKO or at the kickoff next year or the following year, standing up in front of everybody, telling us about what we're doing with the Power Platform, and you're going to get on board
Yes.
because that's the sales initiative for the year.
Right. And that's the difference between somebody who shows up needing to feel like they have to prove themselves when the account executive says this is how you need to do it and they're like okay, 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 I will change everything about what I need to do in order to appease something that is so far outside of what you do that you think that that's going to win the day. And it is the exact opposite. Understanding your lane, your boundaries, what you provide. I love that story. That is so fantastic. And eventually they'll figure it out. And if not, then
Mm-hmm.
okay, there's no loss to you either. So that's great. Wow, Dominic.
Just some small changes, huh? Right? It's been a little bit.
I'm gonna have to stop calling you Dominic. I'm gonna have to start calling you Dom. You like,
Yeah. So we should probably let the audience in on that, right?
okay, go ahead.
So the difference between Dominic and Dom, right?
Yeah,
Or maybe you're going to ask me about it, but
go for it.
yeah. So it was really funny, right? So there was almost like there's these two personas that I had, right? So you had Dominic. Dominic was the person that did things and I won't say necessarily by the book, but but very kind of uptight and rigid about some things, right? And always trying to do the best, appease, all that stuff, right? But super professional, but I would say safe. And then there was Dom. Dom's the guy that takes his car out, jumps hills, and like goes and does crazy things, has a motorcycle, all that kind of stuff, right? And I do not own a motorcycle now, but the point here was is that there was this. I knew that there was this little bit of an animal inside of me that, like, given the chance to like take chances, take risks, that something would happen, right? And I always felt like for a while, like I always had to live in this Dominic persona, right? I had to be this professional, but given the right opportunity to be able to just kind of go for it, this Dom has been released,
Mm-hmm.
and that has definitely started to kind of change. Probably not until very recently did I feel very comfortable with people just calling me Dom, and he's an animal, you're gonna love him, like
Yep. I love it. I'm so glad to hear that because that took some time. That was a bit of a journey. And yeah,
Mhm.
and it's clear. It's coming through. So that benefits all of us, and it allows you to be more authentically who you are, who you want to be. Gosh, Dom, it's been so great to see you and to catch up the work that we were able to do together. I loved it. And so I'm very happy and pleased and very proud of all of that with you, for you. So I think this is going to resonate for a lot of people who feel like, well, I'm kind of stuck where I am. How do I get out of that? And the first part is dealing with self and your mindset. And you were really a great example of it.
And I appreciate you, Audrey, because honestly, a lot of this is just simply, it's really funny. If you've ever met Audrey, she asks a lot of questions. She doesn't tell you anything. She just asks you a lot of questions, but she asks them in such a way that you start to have these aha moments. And then she will tell you something. Actually, I should say she does tell you things. She'll call you out then nicely, very nicely, right? But like, does that really make sense, Dominic? And you're like, no, it doesn't. Why am I doing this? Right. So all the challenges, the blockers, the mental games really that I played with myself, being able to have you listen and then be able to kind of hear what I've been saying and help me get around those things. Like I wouldn't be here without you. And I very much appreciate that.
Tom, you're going to make me cry. All right, we got to go before I have a full on breakdown. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's been so exciting to catch up.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, if you want to increase your influence in your executive presence but are feeling kind of stuck, grab the link in the show notes and schedule a call.